You guys, okay. When was the last time you had one of those moments where you have to stand back and look at the universe and be like, how is it that you do what you do? How do you line these things up? Oh my God. Okay, so welcome to another installment on the Aries North Node. And this is also something of, oh gosh, like there's so much to unpack here. The first thing I want to say is the show I want to recommend to you, which is called Betrayal, the Perfect Husband. And it is a show that is on Hulu, a 3-part docu-series following these two people, Jenifer and Spencer, and what happened in their lives. And it's called Betrayal, the Perfect Husband. You can probably start to guess if you haven't seen it already. And if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Obviously, I'm going to share some of my thoughts about this because this show, as it came into my awareness, I started seeing the thumbnail on Hulu, like right when it came out, which was only at the time I'm recording this within the last month or two. And I was repulsed. I was like, no, I don't care to watch that. Like, I just like was like, there was something very specifically no about it. And it was like the freaking oven timer of divine timing when eventually something was like, exactly that is what I want to watch, right? Like, so one day I randomly click on it and sit there for 3.5 hours and watch all 3 parts like in one go. And because of the visceral reaction that I had to it the first time I watched it, a lot came out of that. For example, like me starting to talk about my TV stuff, like the things that I'm watching and what I'm getting out of it, and like all of the references that I've been making on the channel recently. Also, as I've been specializing into the North Node content kind of at the same time, the very first show that I really wanted to talk to you guys about was this one, was Betrayal, the Perfect Husband. And dude, like all of my contemplations and discussions around people pleasing and likability and unpopular opinions, like all of that has basically been like kind of laying the groundwork for me to even feel capable of sharing my thoughts and my reactions and my consideration of this content. You know, it's just content. It's just one person's story. And that's something I have to lay down right away is like, you know, I feel like this conversation, we have to have a foundation around victim blaming. We need to talk about that up front, as far as that is not my intention. That is not my intention to look at this story and say everything he did was totally fine. But there is an element to this story that felt personally like this is why I had to figure out how to share unpopular opinions, because like this docu-series is painting a picture that is legitimately scary to me. Scary in how it unfolded. And this is not going to be necessarily like a review of the show itself. I am guessing that I will be back multiple times to talk about this series. The piece that I wanted to lay down here first is just the divine intention behind it. Like, as far as me even watching it in the first place, and then taking this whole journey about getting up to speed with being able to talk about it. And almost a week ago now, I rewatched it for like probably the 6th time, and have pages in a Word document of like the specific phrases and elements of the story that are just like red flag after red flag after red flag of like, I'm not going to blame the victim, but I do want to educate people about these elements. And like I said, like there's something very specifically calling me. And so this has been, you know, at least a month in the making that I've rewatched the documentary multiple times. I've been thinking about it. I've been like mulling it over inside my like subconscious this whole entire time. Meanwhile, talking about other things, talking about like, you know, I say what we're talking about here on the channel is leaning into authenticity and all the reasons why we don't. And so finding this series, Betrayal, the Perfect Husband, was like, here's some authenticity that I feel really called to lean into. And instantly there was a roadblock up of like, I am not yet equipped to talk about this. And for starters was because it brought up so much emotion, so much fire, so much like mad at all the wrong people. Like I'm looking at what, you know, there's in the story, there's the duper and the duped, right? Like it's a story of betrayal. It's a story of trust being completely, not just broken, but literally shattered. And, you know, her story through that, it's very much from her point of view. I mean, he was like in jail for the most part up until very recently, I think. So like she's the one telling the story. And my main takeaway, like I'll just tell you right now, you're not gonna like the rest of this if you can't hear this part, is like my main takeaway is that the telling of the story is so lacking in compassion for the duper, the husband, the guy who did the bad things. He's the baddie in the story, right? She's the goodie, he's the baddie. He did everything wrong. And I'm just like, I don't fucking see it that way. I see something very different. And I want to not like change anybody's mind about anything for starters. I want to, though, open up a window into my mind and let whoever wants to see through this window, as far as like I said, I have pages of things from this 3.5 hours of content that like feel like I need to talk to you guys about this. I need to like unpack this and why. Right, that's why we shouldn't be doing it that way, because look at what happened. Like when everything came out, like a line from the show is that, you know, when everything came to light, her entire world like shattered. She said that she fell into a dark hole. And what I see, for starters, the difference in like what it looks like from the outside, obviously I'm not the one living it, but like for starters, she didn't fall into a hole so much as when everything came to light. It was like the light switch got flicked on and now she can see where she actually is. So like she walked into the hole over years of marriage, and eventually she was disillusioned about the nature of the hole, right? He had wallpapered over a lot of things for her benefit, and she wasn't looking behind the wallpaper, right? She was like, oh, what a beautiful pattern, moving on with my life. Like, right, like efficient. It's efficient to trust other people. That's why we do it. And when we give our trust to someone who has not legitimately earned it, that opens us up. It makes us vulnerable to be taken advantage of. For, you know, basically, like I've said many, many times on this channel, that every single person has free will. Every single person can do exactly what they want to do all the time, no matter what. No matter what they said to you, no matter what they promised to you, no matter what they signed, no matter what. There's no limit that our authenticity, the fire, the primal energy of our being will cross every boundary to get to what it wants to have, period. That's animal nature, right? Like that's in my view, that's the perspective that I'm opening the window, and you can look through this way of seeing it like this with me. And I would love to hear reflections as far as like, you know, what am I missing as we go through this conversation? What am I missing? But this opening gambit, this opening offering, is really coming through in this timing because this morning I was inspired to make a different video. P.S. There's a link down below. I'm putting the name on the screen here. If you're inspired to click on it, that is a special offering for anyone who happens to be here listening to this right here, right now. It explains more at the beginning of that next video what exactly it is that you're stumbling upon. You don't have to take in the whole thing, but I encourage you to check it out if you happen to be here. It seems like you're aligned with that message. But this opening offering is extremely pointed in its timing because this morning I recorded that other video, link in the description, name on the screen. And while I was waiting for that video to process so that I could record this one, I clicked back into Betrayal, The Perfect Husband, and am rewatching the first episode because the first episode is by far, which again, this is totally backwards from what I would imagine pop culture is going to say about that series. Like, you know, in the status quo sense, the third episode is by far the most upsetting. But as far as what I can see, the most upsetting is the first episode. It's just like, talk about fire me up. Like, just, I can't even explain like where all of this energy comes from to like, you know, Aries North Node can be manifesting an opponent. And I feel like not that any of these characters on this show are my opponent, but the naivete, like to be so naive as to believe the fantasy is real, like that scares me to no end. So like, I want to spend time in the rest of like, anytime you see Betrayal, The Perfect Husband, that image is probably going to be on a lot of stills going forward. Because I want to spend time to unpack these pages of dynamics in this 3.5 hours of content. I want to unpack them for the productive, useful purpose of being able to distinguish reality from fantasy, right? Like, when am I dreaming and when am I awake? That's a real question. And basically that's what happened, I think, from my external perspective, is that like the wife essentially was dreaming. She was fantasizing this relationship around herself, and he was behaving in ways that supported and did not challenge her fantasy. He allowed her to continue in her fantasy. He did not introduce information that she did not ask for. Right? She wasn't looking behind the wallpaper. He was just putting it up and she was just letting it exist. Okay, so then she woke up and now she's in reality and she says, I fell into a dark hole. It's like, no, you woke up. Now you're awake. Great, great. Now you can consciously create what it is that you want next. And there's so much, like so many specifics that, like I said, I want to get into. But that first episode, so deeply upsetting. I've watched it the most times. It just continues to draw me back into it. And I just like can't get over it. There's something like gripping my core about this particular story. And which is why it is fascinating to me that it's only today that it occurred to me. I wonder what their North Nodes are. Spencer and Jenifer, the characters on this story that's being told, like, I wonder what their natal charts look like. I mean, I hadn't even gone there. And that is full circle with like, universe, how do you do this? How do you do what you do? Because here I am finally feeling ready to like share and start to share my unpopular opinions, right? Like I had to kind of go through some stuff with that. And so I'm feeling really ready to kind of let the cat out of the bag and run free, right? And then today, here's this idea. I wonder what their North Nodes are. What about that? So I'm going to put Spencer's chart on the screen and we're going to look at it together for just a second. And again, this is very much in that opening gambit of like, we will get so much more into this, but he's our teacher, okay? He's like our mascot for the darkest dark of the Libra South Node, of like what true and utter codependence really looks like. Okay, and you'll notice his 0-degree Libra South Node and his 0-degree Aries North Node. And that Aries North Node that happens to be conjunct his Chiron, his deepest wound. He's our teacher. He is a wounded healer of epic proportions. Not yet. He's mostly still spinning in his pain, as far as I understand. Just recently having gotten out of jail, he's now a registered sex offender for the rest of his life. And the transits that I'm showing on the chart here are for June 1st, 2018. And that happens to be the date that he was arrested for assaulting a student. And that was what he did his jail time for. And so the date he was arrested was happening, like you can see it, like pretty much exactly during his Chiron return. And his North Node and Chiron are right there together, exactly opposite the South Node, Uranus, and Jupiter, all in the very early degrees of Libra. And that is one of the things from that first episode that if you do go ahead and watch it, which again, I highly recommend, if you're tracking with this Aries North Node transit contemplation, like you cannot miss this series, this Hulu Betrayal, the Perfect Husband series. Like he's the poster child for why Aries North Node is so important for us all, because people can say whatever the fuck they want. That's their right. Okay? And he proved that big time. Big time. Like basically, and this is no judgment, what he did with his life, like in that period where he was married to her, like she later found out, like by bringing all of this to light from his email account, that basically like all day, every day, he was living his life trying to figure out like who he could have sex with. And he had lots of different fantasies that he wanted to play out, lots of different like role play type things that he wanted to play out. And again, this is my main complaint about that series, is that it lacks compassion for him. It lacks compassion for the self-soothing he was doing and the compassion for codependence in general. Like, and that's what I feel like I want to bring to the surface, because the more we can have compassion for kind of the pattern of codependence, especially when we can see it in other people, we can become more aware of those patterns existing inside of ourselves. And that's where I think, you know, again, he is such a perfect example of there are sweet talkers and charmers and snake oil salesmen around every corner in this world. And we knew that there would be, okay? Like it's not shocking. Like that's my other complaint about this series, is like how shocked they were that like this is even possible. And I'm like, of course it's possible. Like he has a sex drive. He's kinky. He has fetishes. Like, why is this new information? Like, we're human animals. Like, we are fucking animals. For real. And the things that go through our sexual desires, if our sexuality is allowed to flow, right? And a lot of women, and I would say people in general, our sexuality gets really repressed. And so then we can lull ourselves into this delusion of thinking that we don't even have it. And then we can get into the place of feeling up on our high horse, judging other people for their depravity and their perversion and all that shit that these evil people have going on. Breathe it out. Like, it just, it bothers me. It really bothers me that we cannot have compassion for each other's kinkiness. You know, like, again, I feel like this is really calling me forward, that like, I am here to have compassion for whatever it is that each individual is attracted to. like it's not by accident that we find ourselves attracted to certain things, that, there is great healing that can happen through our sexuality. And actually, popping back onto Spencer's chart here, he does have Neptune in Scorpio. So what Neptune in Scorpio means is that your path of spiritual development is happening through a scorpionic realm. Sex, death, rebirth, fear, allowing other people's energy to support and sustain you. Like, when I look at Spencer, I see a lot of mistakes that he made. Again, that's where I don't want to paint the picture like, oh, what he did was completely fine, because it wasn't. He illuminated a lot of really important conversation points. The first and foremost one being around consent. The only issue I see with anything at all that he did was that he was very under the table about it. He was very manipulative about it, about getting to the outcome that he wanted. He was very subtle. He was very like piece by piece by piece by piece, like getting people to let their guard down and let their boundaries down, rather than just like being direct and saying outright, like, this is what I want. And again, in that way, I feel like that was part of what the energy was that got stirred up so powerfully within me, is that I see that in not only myself, absolutely myself, my people-pleasing tendencies, my wanting to like suss out other people and like kind of just give them one piece at a time. And if they don't react badly, then I'll give them another piece. And like, I'm very much like pulling safety out of them. Like, it's so piece by piece by piece by piece. And that allows me to continue to hide if it's not safe to come out. Like, it's just so conniving. And in that way, like what he did, being able to see that, like, I despise that behavior in what he did. I despise how underhanded it was. I despise how dishonest it was. And that's it. That's the only thing wrong with what he did, was that he wasn't upfront about it. He didn't seek consent from everyone involved, because at that point, if everybody's into it, then cool, like, great. Again, sexuality holds many dimensions that we can take advantage of for our own healing and evolution. But when you lure people there under false pretenses, or when you are assuming consent and kind of like, like easing people into it, like, how they say, like the frog in the pot of water, like if you turn the heat up gradually, like that frog will boil to death. Like it just won't even notice that it's in danger. And again, this is why one of the reasons, one of the facets to where all of this energy is freaking coming from is like, this is what's out there. And I know that for a fact, because not only am I seeing like, this is what he did, but I know that I'm doing it too. Like, people pleasing in general, that's what that is like you're turning the heat up on the frog little by little by little. And I think most of us would really not like to admit that we are personally doing that to people. We wouldn't consciously say that that's what we're doing, but at the same time, like, when we intentionally withhold and we intentionally hide and we intentionally only show the part that we think will be accepted and loved, this is why I am personally leaning into trusting my instincts about other people. AKA, I am a lot less willing participant in gaslighting. Like, if what you're saying doesn't match my instincts, I don't believe you. Period. You don't have to like that, but I don't believe you. So gaslighting at that point, like, there's no such thing, because either you are a willing participant, your instincts want you to be there, or they don't. And what somebody else is doing or saying or telling you or wanting you to believe doesn't really matter. Either your instincts want you to be there or they don't. And the other thing is that this is part of the fuel for my own Aries North Node expansion, my own expansion into being a whole lot more forthright about who I am and not sugarcoating so much, like not trying to be so likable. I don't want to be likable. I don't want to even have the option to dupe someone, because the sad truth that I'm seeing is that there are so many people who are almost like just duping themselves. And that's the part where I really want to unravel that and unpack it and, you know, teach off of this 3.5 hours of content as long as that needs to go on. Because, like, seriously, if we are willing to believe in the fantasy, if we are willing to believe in the fairy tale, then it is our own fault when we wake up in the bottom of the hole, okay? Because the fantasy isn't real. The fairy tale doesn't exist. The perfect husband doesn't fucking exist. So if you believe that you're married to the perfect husband, you have problems. And I don't mean like personal problems. I don't mean like whatever. I mean like there's danger present if you think you have the perfect husband. Like if you can't list off like what are his shadow patterns, like what are the, you know, the tender spots in his psyche, where does his ego get wounded and where does he go to when his ego is wounded? Like there is no such thing as the perfect husband. There just isn't. And if we will allow ourselves to believe that there is, we in fact are already duping ourselves, right? So like at that point, let the other person off the hook, okay? Like your beliefs have you in a place where like reality is not present. And then all this stuff is going on in reality that once we find out it's happening in reality, we're like, It's like, dude, you're the one that was absent from reality this whole time, not the other way around. You know, there's another line from the show. This was like further into the episodes where she said something about like this like secret life. Like it was just all so fake. And like, you know, he just is so fake and he had all of this fake life going on. And I'm like, again, that's not how I see it. I see his behind the scenes activities. That was his real life. And then you were the fantasy. You were the, you know, the one who was not looking behind the wallpaper. That was the fantasy. That was the fakeness. That was the mask. Like, just because we want to believe it's real doesn't mean that that's the real part. The real part was happening over here. Like, the part where it really finally became real for her, poor thing, is when she went to the doctor and found out that she had an STD that he gave to her. And that was when the worlds came crashing together. Was like, okay, fine, the fantasy was the fake part. Like, the reality was that this is who he is. This is who he is. This is probably who he's always been, right? This is the part where we don't know, because we haven't heard Spencer's side. And anything that we do hear from Spencer, he is so locked inside that Libra South Node shadow. And who can fucking blame him with North Node on Chiron? Like, evolving into his own identity is the most painful thing he'll ever do. And he's manifesting the hard way of getting there. I mean, he got thrown into jail for his previous lifestyle, for his Libra South Node, like, codependent issues, like, that led him to this extreme that eventually, yeah, he's got to go sit in jail and think about what he did. And now he's out, and I mean, I can't find anything where he's talked yet. And so I'm ready to hear Spencer's side when he becomes a self-aware person, hopefully, and can tell us, like, what drove you to this behavior, because I guarantee it wasn't for shits and giggles. You know, there's a deep level of pain and insecurity that drives us to codependent behavior in the first place, right? Like, wanting someone else to take care of our needs is a very scary place to be, because there's no sustainability in that, right? Like all day, every day, he's having to figure out like, who's going to meet my needs today? Like that's the definition of codependence. And he's allowed. He's allowed. Like, aren't we all only ever doing that? I know I am. Like, whether we consciously are aware of it or not, like all day, every day, I believe we are all meeting our needs in the best way we know how. And if we knew how to do it better, we would be doing it better. So that's where, yeah, I have compassion for him, and I have thoughts and opinions to share with the people who still want to believe in the fantasy, that still want to believe that the fairy tale version is real. And the main advice I have, without getting into the pages of all the things I want to talk about, but like the main advice I have is, again, if the shadow is missing, you're in non-physical, you're in the fantasy. In the real world, in the reality version, there's light and there's dark. And so if you can't see both of them, then you don't have the full picture. And until you can see someone's wounding, their unhealed parts, their shadow version, their temper, their, sexual proclivities, like all of the things that we keep close to the vest. If you don't see that, then they're not showing it to you. And again, that's their prerogative. They don't have to show it to you. And that's where, again, I identify with like, sure, I keep plenty close to the vest. Like I was explaining in one of the recent videos, like I have a whole mountain of unpopular opinions that I've never even told you guys about. And there's so many of you who are here and around, and I keep stuff hidden even in this space of owning authenticity, because it's human nature to want to protect ourselves and to want to make sure that it's safe to come out of our hiding. And that's where I think, shaming these people like Spencer, shaming the manipulative narcissist, shaming the sex addict or whatever it is, like shaming them doesn't fucking help anything. It really doesn't. It drives them more into hiding and makes it even more of like an important priority that each and every single individual be trusting their own instincts. Because the less our society is willing to allow the shadow to come into existence and have a place amongst talked about, accepted, spectrum of human experience, like right now, the shadow doesn't have a place to exist in our society. And so each individual is kind of having to bring their own shadow up into their own experience, their own reality. And then it's really a matter of who do you choose to let in on that? And that's a function of safety. That's a function of like, who do I think is not going to judge me? Who's going to accept me for this truth? Who's going to not throw rocks at me and want to like come and set me on fire? Like, who is going to let me be me? And I know from my own personal experience, the only people that I show my real self are the ones who I believe will treat me with kindness and acceptance, and if not understanding, at least curiosity rather than judgment. Like there's a part for the duped one to play, as far as recognizing that we see what we want to see. And so if we don't want to see somebody's shadow, they can't show it to us. So are you seeing their shadow or not, I believe is mostly a function of the individual's willingness to see it, not necessarily the other person's willingness to show it to you. Because if you're willing to see it, over time, they will reveal it to you. I don't think anybody owes anybody else like a one-stop shop. Like, here's a dump of like, this is all my shadow. This is all my shit. Let me lay my cards on the table and then you can decide if you want to stay or you want to go. Like, it's going to be a gradual process. I think that's normal and natural to expect. And if you're willing to see it, eventually you will see it. They will show it to you. And until they've shown it to you, don't make any assumptions about it not being there. Like the whole, again, the outrage and the disbelief, the shock over this is who he is and this is what he's doing. I'm like, I guarantee you that there are more people living lives like that than not. Like where they are in secret getting their needs fulfilled by people who they believe will not judge them. I believe that that is common. I believe it's happening every day, all over the place, all over the place. Like how many secret drinkers, secret eaters, like you don't have to be a sex addict to like go in hiding and get your needs met, right? Like that's what we do. Oh, I want there to be this compassion for the human experience where we can bring our shadows out into the light and we can have a conversation where we aren't trying to shame each other. We're not sitting up on a high horse saying, sucks to be you. You know, I'm over here all perfect and polished and I got no shadows, you know, like I'm just all everything's okay. And it's like, that's the problem, right? Like the toxic positivity, the spiritual bypassing, that's the problem, not the toxic narcissist. He's not the problem. Spencer's not the problem. The refusal to see reality is the problem, right? Like the refusal to believe that there must be shadow to all things. The fact that she's married to this guy for 7 years and like all of this stuff is like brand new information. That's where like, again, I go full circle with like, I don't want to talk about this in a way where like I'm blaming the person who got taken advantage of, but in a very real Aries North Node sense, I do want to spark as much opening of the eyes as possible to like, yeah, so don't fall for it. Like, don't give your trust away to someone who hasn't shown you their dark side, right? Like, you need to see the whole picture before you know whether or not this is going to be somebody that, you know, you should be letting down your guard with. You should be moving in closer towards them. Like, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like, anyone can put on a mask. Anyone can wear a disguise. And this is, okay, so I'll leave it right here because, again, how does the universe do this? So I think part of this pull that I'm feeling towards understanding what happened between Jenifer and Spencer, what happened in this dynamic of like, how did this even happen, right? It seems like the perfect storm, in my opinion, like very much like it takes two to tango kind of thing. And you better believe it was like a slice of humble pie when I finally had the thought, right? I start looking up birth charts with Spencer's and I see like he's an Aries North Node and I'm like, seriously, mind blown. Like how of all the, so good. So I circle through that for a while and then I'm like, oh wait, what's Jenifer's North Node? She's a Pisces North Node, like me. She's a Virgo South Node, like me. Yeah. I am right there with her in healing my own gullibility, in developing enough of a sense of self to even have access to instincts, right? Like I resonate with trusting the wolf in sheep's clothing. I've done it. I've been there. And I think that is why this was personally so upsetting to me to watch essentially like, you know, that dynamic. Like I've lived it and then to watch it play out where like, oh, it's the fairy tale and it's so perfect and it all happens so fast. And then come to find out down the road, he's just not even a little bit who you thought he was. Like you had no clue. You went to these extremely intimate places and you had no idea who this person was. I did that, right? Like he didn't make me. I wasn't forced. I wasn't, you know, you could say coercion is a type of being forced, but again, I personally believe, this is one of my many unpopular opinions, that in order to be coerced, you do have to be a willing participant. You have to be willing to believe in the fantasy. You have to be willing to set your instincts aside, or to not have any in the first place, which was very much where I was. Like, I didn't have instincts back at this point where I was falling for things like this. And I was very much in where I was in my insecurity inside myself, in that codependence. I was very much wanting another person to, like, essentially the relationship became my identity. Like, my relationship to the other person and our exploration, our building our life together was my identity at that phase when I was the one being duped. And waking up in the hole on more than one occasion of like, yeah, I see how I walked myself in here. I was so ready for the relationship that it was like musical chairs almost. Like, I wasn't even really seeing who was sitting in front of me. It just was someone. And that's a tough pill to swallow in terms of accepting responsibility for how I got myself into that situation. And so I think as I watch Jenifer, a fellow Pisces North Node, wake up at the bottom of the hole and, watch what Spencer was doing the whole time and how easy it was for him to basically kind of like dance with her illusion. It didn't take much effort, from what it sounded like, to keep her illusion going that she like had herself in. And from there, I mean, he was really freed up to like go do whatever it was that he wanted. And yeah, like finding out that somebody is able to be duplicitous like that, like I remember that feeling, when I really go back down into my wounding from those very early relationships. Like, I remember feeling so stupid. Like, how did I not know that? How did I not see it? And I can see now that it really truly is, I didn't want to see it. I wanted to have the relationship. I've joked before that like, that I was in a lot of relationships where I was kind of like settling. The reason my relationship history was so constant was like getting out of one and then just like settling for whatever was right in front of me, that next one. Like, there really weren't any hoops that the person needed to jump through. I was just willing, and there they were. And so here's a 2-year relationship that I had, like that. And so to be in a place where essentially like what I'm feeling is like, there needs to be more hoops, not less. There needs to be like, dude, I am the Fabergé egg in the middle of the laser field. And if you're going to get to me, I know that you had to dance your way and bend and contort your way through this laser field. So by the time you even are reaching me, I know that the field itself has put you to the test because I'm hard to get to. I have boundaries. I have moats. I have crocodiles in the moats. I keep all of the ones who aren't truly worthy on the outside. And that requires a level of independence that, again, back then I did not have. I was not able to be alone. I could not stand being alone. And because of that, I was willing to be in this fantasy of allowing myself to believe that this person and I could have this relationship. We could have this life together. And then when I found out that that was not true, I would typically for 15 years, I just recreated the pattern and did that for time after time after time. And now here I am sitting inside the moats, sitting inside with the drawbridges up. You are going to be a special soul who's able to even get into my field. And so that feels like, again, the gift of the Aries North Node, the gift of being so authentic is that it is self-protection, right? When you are willing to be forthright about your honest truth and put yourself out there. For example, if I were Spencer and I come right out and say, listen up, I have no interest in monogamy. I have every interest in us having this like completely open relationship where we are each other's primary partner, but we are also each completely free to take the option to explore whatever else we feel we need to do. That we do not possess each other, we do not own each other. I personally have interests that lie outside of hetero sex. I want to experience this. I have these fetishes. I really enjoy this kind of play. I want this much personal space to explore my own individuality. And this is how I see our relationship coming together. And if the person has run away screaming for the hills, good fucking riddance. Good fucking riddance. Like, that's not your person, right? This is reality. Not everybody's gonna like it. Like, not everybody's gonna like us. Some people are going to find us repulsive, right? As soon as I say this is not monogamous, a lot of people will instantly check themselves off the list. They're like, nope, not for me. Okay, cool. Good to know. I'm not gonna waste my time. I'm not gonna get 2 years down the road with somebody who does not want what I want. So that is the main takeaway as far as trusting your own instincts, a really deep, profound relationship with consent. Like, I want to personally work through this as far as, you know, I've been the subtle one. I've been the one to like get people to lower their walls gradually, little by little. And I have to really come into like conscious awareness with that part of myself as far as how much of that is manipulative and how much of that is my right to privacy, how much of that is me wanting a specific outcome from the other person. I'm like trying to get them on my hook so that by the time I deliver the really bad news, they're like already stuck and they can't go anywhere. Like, what am I doing by withholding certain parts of myself at certain times? What am I doing with that? And that is a question that, like I said, like this whole betrayal, the perfect husband has been an iceberg of epic proportions as far as adding to my understanding of this Aries North Node transit, and how fascinating that the lead characters in this story, one's an Aries North Node, one's a Pisces North Node, and Pisces North Node is where we're headed next. So I thank you so much for hanging out with me. And again, those of you who are listening to this part right here, I would love to know you. I would love to know who is it that's able to hear all of this. It feels amazing, so cathartic to let all of this come out and be seen. And thank you, legitimately thank you to anyone who has witnessed me in this place. I appreciate you. I feel like we are connected soul to soul, and I would love to make that connection physical. Would love to hear from you down below in the comments, or you can reach out at my email address, owningauthenticity@gmail.com. Until next time, I do hope that you will take such good care of yourself, and so will I.